Oshinoko has had an explosive debut ever since its first episode came out, to its trending on social media, to people's overall reaction to the ending of the first episode, to people finding out that the first episode was an hour and 22 minutes long, to people rating it the #1 series on my anime list after one episode, to also just getting to see people realize that the writer of Oshinoko is the same writer of Kaguya-sama. There has been a lot that's been happening in the anime and manga community for the last 24 hours, and I want to take some time and talk about Oshinoko here, and kind of the final segment of the episode. And I want to do a brief disclaimer here before I go any further. If you have not watched the first episode, I do highly recommend you to click off this video, because you should watch it. I don't want to spoil anyone. I've been trying to be very careful with that with my thumbnails, etc. So please, if you have not seen it and you are interested, do go watch it. Now, if you don't care for spoilers, carry on. But anyways, with that disclaimer out of the way, I want to talk about this final segment of the episode, mainly the scene where Ai dies. And the reason for that is because I think if there's any talking point that everybody is talking about when it comes to this, episode, is definitely this segment. Because even if, let's say, you're a manga reader and you knew this was going to happen, you're probably going to be emotionally invested and just extremely heartbroken when you see this scene. Hell, me even sitting down and getting this all together, putting all this together, having the scene pulled up, I was getting emotional just doing it before I turned the video recorder on. I was just like, man, this scene is just straight up, it hits. Like, it really hits. And when I was having to sit down and I was like taking pictures of stuff like this for this video, I was just like, man, what they did for this scene really just is a gut punch. It's a straight gut punch that you just, like, even if you see it coming, it hurts. It really does. And so let's dive into the nitty-gritty here and talk about one thing in particular, the anime and manga comparison between these scenes. So, I guess what's fitting is we should start with this. This is the manga scene of what we got yesterday in the anime. You could see very similar design, everything about that, but the way it's drawn here in anime format really emphasizes the lifeless nature of Ai in this moment. Obviously, in the manga, you could see that as well, because if there's one thing that the series does very well, and the anime and even the manga, it's the eyes. The eyes are something that really stands out. And, like, I think that's one big drawing factor that probably got a lot of people to even want to start the show. Like, if you're an anime only, and you didn't know about this conclusion or anything, you probably saw the trailer or a key visual or something, and you're like, man, that character's eyes are really pretty, and probably is what made you kind of start it. I definitely could see a lot of people starting the series just because of the eye designs. And so, when you see how Ai's overall character has been expressed throughout, the first episode, and then you see the segment where she dies, the life leaves her, her eyes are just dead. And it's a really interesting moment where you see just the color leave. And I feel like there's a lot of people that are talking about the scene in the emotional department or the gut punch department, why did Ai have to die? But they're not mentioning the fact that just the way this scene is depicted, especially in the anime, you can just see how she died smiling in a way, but she also, the light that was in her just ended all too soon. And it's what really hits so hard. And I feel like the animators, especially for this scene, went extra hard, just really emphasizing, like, the way her hair is drawn, to the way the eyes are. It's a big detail here. Like, once again, I'm gonna show the manga panel. Like, the manga panel obviously does a very good job here. You can see it. But just the way it's done in the anime definitely brings a lot of life to it, which is what I talked about in my first impressions yesterday, is that this series was definitely made for an anime format, because, like, the whole concept of it is literally about the colors or life, showbiz, entertainment, and the eyes being a big drawing factor to it. It makes sense that an anime would just do so well with this series, and movement and form and all that, because it really is something that was meant to be brought to life and elevated to a whole new level. But let's carry on to another scene. We got this scene, this very iconic and emotional scene as well, where you see Ai holding Aqua, and then she's putting her hand on, the glass, and she's looking at Ruby. And Ruby is trying to figure out what's going on here. She can't really fully understand, because from everything from the plot and what we got in this moment, is that Ruby was someone that also died very young. Her life was cut short thanks to an incurable disease, and she passed away before she was reincarnated as this child. And obviously, just seeing this very emotional moment of someone brutally dying is not something I think anyone is ready to see. And her technically already having a young mentality, this is just so young for her to be able to take in and understand. Now, it's not to say that, Aqua isn't going through a lot too in this scene, because Aqua was already brutally murdered in the past, but he was also someone that was a doctor and has seen probably a lot of people die. And because of this, this is going to hit hard, especially if you're attached to a patient or attached to someone that you care about deeply. It's going to hurt when you see someone die. So there's a lot of multi-layers here, and the way this scene conveys such a very dark moment, but also they throw a contrasting of light here, is very fascinating to me. Like, I want to take a moment to look at the shading of this scene, okay? So obviously, once again, you can see the light in the eyes of the characters. You can see, like, Ruby's eyes, they're glowing. You can see, eyes, I know it sounds similar. Her eyes are glowing as well. And when you just take a look at it, you can see slowly but surely, before we got to this scene, the light in her eye is disappearing. And the way you see this darkness, kind of like a silhouette of darkness around her, but also you see the light on the sides, it's trying to compress the darkness, but the darkness is slowly pushing the light away. And I do think that the way the shading here is done absolutely brilliant. And let's show the manga equivalent of this scene. So here's the scene in the manga, as you could see here. And obviously, just by first look, just looking at the scene and comparing it to, the anime, obviously there is definitely some huge differences. There is more blood on display here, with the way the blood is on Aqua's head to, Ai's hand here, to just the way the blood is on the back of the door as well, or the door, you can just see it right there. And then if you take a look at, the manga, you don't see as much. It's very toned down, so to speak. And so when you take a hard look at this scene in the anime, you can see that they want to make an extra attention to detail, just that, she's bleeding out, losing her life. Her life is literally draining out of her, and there is nothing that can stop this. And it's just a legitimately sad and tragic scene about the whole ordeal. And once again, the shading of the backgrounds and stuff really emphasize this, because once again, the manga, yes, this is an incredible moment in the manga, but you can see that it does not have a lot of shading as well. So I do think that it's fascinating by just the way the anime depicts it. And once again, goes along with what I said, that the anime really elevates this scene in particular. Now, moving on to the next scene, let's talk about this scene, the recording, so to speak, of basically, Ai giving a message to her children, and this is something that's kind of like a time capsule, so to speak, by the way this whole thing is conveyed. And a lot of people might not recognize this, because if you're someone that, was watching this episode, you might have stopped watching it at the ending song. But there was a scene after the ending song, and there was a post-credit scene, which is this. And you get to see, Ai sit down, and she's holding her two children, Ruby and Aqua, and she's talking about the exact same thing that you see in this manga panel, talking about how, she can't wait to see when they're grown up, she can go out drinking with them, etc. And the way it's obviously depicted in, the manga, there is a flair to this, showcasing like it's an old recording device, homemade camera recording, and I do like that design. It reminds me a lot of like Fujimoto from Chainsaw Man and how he draws panels, and I do think that if there is one thing that was lost from, let's say, the manga to the anime, it was definitely this scene, because you could see that there isn't really that filter here, so to speak. But at the same time, I guess the reason why it looks like this is because she is a professional. She's used to being on camera, etc. So most likely that's why it looks more professional as a camera. But the point, though, is that if you look at the way the scene is drawn, it kind of references, Ruby and Aqua's birthday. It's their first birthday, you see these toys, you see just the living space, it's very bright, it's very vibrant. The home that these three are in is very joyous. It might not be perfect, but it's a very joyous moment. And obviously, Ai wants to share this with her children. And so when you get to this, moment in, the manga, when you, see the manga, it's more close-up and personal looking, but you don't get to see the background scenery that shows a lot of life and color. This adds to the tragedy, obviously, but I think that there's good and bad in both of these depictions, because obviously with the manga it's more personal and front and center, while the anime just tries to show this very life like this life and comfy scene after all the darkness that we just saw. So I feel like, once again, I mentioned this briefly in my video yesterday, but I wanted to talk about just the overall differences and how a lot of these scenes were done better in the anime. I legitimately am impressed by just how well the studio did with everything, and I mean, once again, it's legit sad. Not even looking at this from an art perspective and, like, what was done here. Just looking at character development-wise and just what is going to happen to the character psyches because of this event is legitimately interesting. It's a very fascinating direction that the story went, and this is obviously what's going to cause a lot of people to be engaged with it and want to know what is going to happen next, because a lot of people cared about Ai a lot, and seeing her die in such a way is legitimately a very sad moment. So I'm going to leave the video at that. I wanted to make a brief video doing an anime and manga comparison for this scene in particular. If you guys would like more stuff like this, do let me know in the comments below. But with that, be safe, stay healthy, Chibi out.